So thank you for joining us this evening for the December 8th Monte Sereno Better Streets Commission meeting. Before the meeting is called to order, I would like to point out a few house rules to assist the commissioners, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Commissioners, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For tonight's meeting, we are using Zoom to host the Better Streets Commission meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a commissioner speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the chair and enabled to speak to the commissioners. Only attendees using Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from a telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are not all in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call. Barry, you're on mute.
I guess it's to me. Let me bring up the agenda. Sorry, I was looking at everybody's face. All right, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And you want to start with the roll call, Gracie?
Yes. Okay, Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Chaffin?
Here.
And then Commissioner Saxena?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we have two commissioners absent, correct?
Well, we have, technically the new commissioner won't be starting until the 2023.
Oh, okay.
Vacant, and yes, we do have one absent commissioner tonight's meeting.
Oh, I thought I saw that they were swore in, so I assumed they were already effective, but I guess that's not the case. Okay, and then let's see, orders of the day. Does anybody have any changes to the orders of the day? Should there have been a minutes to approve of the last meeting? That feels like it's missing.
So I just would like to let you know that at this point we are waiting for, we're going to be having someone starting in a position that will be providing our engineer some assistance with the minutes. So in the February meeting, you will be seeing the minutes from October, the regular and special meeting, and tonight's meetings on there for approval.
Okay, that's perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need a helper.
Indeed.
That doesn't surprise me, given your hour limitation. Even if you didn't have that, it seems like you need a helper. So no changes to the orders of the day in that case. Presentations, I believe that's presentations from the public. Do we have anything, Goisi? Any members of the public?
No presentations.
Or is that what that is? I don't.
I left it on there, but there's nothing, no presentations.
Okay, and the same for oral communications, or there's written communications, but they that I'm aware of, but they arrived in time to be included below.
Yes.
Are there any new ones?
Nothing new. So the we did go ahead and include the comments under unfinished business, the first item, and then also the comments received for committee and commission reports and the first item on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the consent calendar, which is the consideration of future teleconferencing. Do you need to discuss that at all, or can we just go ahead and vote on it since we're familiar with it?
I believe you guys can go ahead and vote on it.
Okay.
We'll do it, I believe, until moving on still into the next meeting. And I'll provide you guys any updates via email for the February, because I'm still trying to confirm if we will be able to actually still have one more last Zoom meeting in February, or if we'll have to have that meeting then in person. But for the purpose of this meeting, we do need to vote on this.
Okay, go right ahead, please.
So I'll make a motion that we, approve the consent calendar as it reads.
Thank you for remembering that we need to do that.
Thank you, Doreen. I second it.
I'll proceed with the count. The vote, Commissioner Nelson,
Yes,
Chair Chafin,
Yes.
and then Commissioner, and please, by all means, correct me if I'm saying your guys' names wrong. Saxena.
Saxena. Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, the next item is the draft bicycle and pedestrian master plan. Now, Doreen and I spent some time thinking about what changes we would like to see made to this master plan. And I think we agreed on pretty much all of this with the possible exception of section 4.2, which we probably need to dig into a little bit. Have you had a chance to look at it? Shalini, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't have any comments. I did take a look at it, but I couldn't get into it too much. So I would just agree with what you and Doreen with.
Mm-hmm. One other thing maybe we should talk about early on is Bob has some very good comments, but they feel to me like they're, specific proposals, which I don't think is where we want to go with this particular iteration.
no, I think that when I read those, they are good comments, but I thought we were focusing on basically just how to modify or, come up with the, kind of the second draft of the master plan so that it was in a document form that was more usable for the committee or the commission so that we could publish something or get it out there and not create a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because adding, what he's suggesting, I think, there's a lot of work needs to happen to actually, put some of those specific proposals in place. So it just doesn't seem like it's the time. Do you have any comment on that, Don? Does that make sense?
I understand the perspective on that, and I think what you're saying makes sense to me.
Okay. So that's, I guess, something that we'll have to save for future meetings. So that brings us to Doreen. You and I, would you say we completely agree on everything except section 4.2?
Yeah, and I think, I still agree with you. It's just a matter of like how the information's presented, and it might even come down to what the consultants can do most, efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's the same information we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Doreen and I both want to see the existing, what we have in place, what the overall network should look like, which I think is outlined in the existing graphs. And then we want to see what the barriers or deficiencies are. We're not 100% sure on the best way to present that. Don, do you think that's something, does that make sense to you? And is that something you think you could communicate to the consultant?
Yeah, I think my plan would be to forward this to the consultant and then have a conversation to work to clarify any questions that they have.
Okay.
But I think this is an excellent start for that conversation and good direction from the commission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that way it's not identifying specific projects. It's just highlighting areas of concern or deficiencies that might not be safe for pedestrians or bike riders because of the existing conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only challenge in that is is calibrating the term area of concern, because you could conceivably have a low sensitivity definition of that term, and then a high sensitivity, we want to do everything possible to avoid any possible injury to any possible person.
Well, I think-
Conservative.
I think I was thinking that the areas of deficiency would be those places where they proposed projects. We just wouldn't be saying, this is the project, you know, that we would propose, because I'm not sure it is. There are a few places that they propose those edge lane roads. And I think even in Bob's notes, he referenced that, like, I don't think that's something that probably even would be considered here. You know, there's maybe a better way to go about addressing those specific sections or areas. So
But what
that's-
you're getting at with your suggestion here is basically you would have the entirety of Dave's Avenue, let's call it annotated or highlighted or shaded as a facility in need of improvement. Because if you look at what the detail on that Dave's Avenue design that was done
mhm.
And led to a $1.6 million grant request, there was something done everywhere on Dave's.
Yeah. So I mean, I
All in-
think that would be, and just like, you know, one that's real close to me is Eaton. The consultants proposed an edge lane road on a section of curvature that there's really no safe place for like pedestrians or bikers, you know, and I'm not sure what the answer would be, but it would just be highlighted as, I don't know, like, you know, needing to be addressed or areas of concern, you know, but I don't think it's appropriate at this point, because we're not even at a point where we're talking about specific project, is to say that you would propose an edge lane road. So
Yeah, I understand that. It's just a matter of what would be the threshold for annotating a section of road of concern. And what I hear you saying, and I gather Gary probably agrees, is that streets like Eaton or Dave's, almost the entirety of those roads, because they lack what could be done.
well, the lower portion of Eaton, I mean, they don't have anything, but it's not nearly as I would call it unsafe as the upper portion, because I think it's a lot wider. So, but you know, I mean, I think what we're trying to get at is kind of a 30,000 foot view. We're not trying to be down in the weeds right now.
I
And
understand,
so,
but would you want the entirety of Eaton from Winchester to Carl to be shown as potentially needing improvement?
I think what I would say from my perspective, I don't know if you agree with me, Barry, is that those specific areas where the consultants defined a project, meaning like on this street between this one and this one, I would highlight those areas and no more. I mean, just those areas that the consultants brought to our attention. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know why we would expand it at this point. I think we should just take their information and kind of, you know, mark those areas that they identified.
Oh, I think I see where Don's coming from, though. Well, first of all of Dave's Avenue should be identified as part of our network, but the straight part of Dave's is pretty good compared to the curvy section on the west. So those are two wildly different scenarios. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Don?
Well, I am, but I was understanding you to mean you were looking for a map that simply showed areas where something could or should. That's perhaps where the breakpoint is here. Could or should be done. You're not going to define it now. You know, put the projects in the appendix and so on. That all makes sense to me. But I'm just trying to see how broad a brush you want to paint these streets with. And I mean, look, if you talk again, if I can go back to Eden, the lower sections of Eden don't have bike lanes, or they don't
No.
have sidewalks. They don't have some of the things that could be done to enhance pedestrian and or bicycle safety. So what I was trying to see is if there was a way to calibrate the term concern. And
I see what you're saying, because I don't think the consultants proposed, did the consultants propose doing anything down there? I know that they proposed creating an edge lane road along the S, but
I don't remember, but
yeah,
I'm just, I guess, using my own analysis, which is Lower Eaton doesn't have
yeah,
any kind of a bike lane, or it doesn't, and
No.
it doesn't have
you're
sidewalks.
right.
So, I mean, if you said the entirety of Eden, because of the potential number of users or demand for peds and bikes, you'd like to see that segment of road on the nominee list, not that it gets approved for a project, and not that we know all the details now, but simply, for example, you're not going to include, what's the cross street? Is that Via del Sur? The cul-de-sac off of Eden?
Yes, exactly.
You're not going to highlight that because the traffic volume and pedestrian.
Oh, it's minimal.
volume and
Yeah,
so on
it's minimal.
Is minimal.
And I would venture to say on Eaton, there are far more pedestrians than bicycle people who bike,
Yes.
far more.
Thanks to that famous walkway, of course.
Exactly, exactly. I use that at least 3 times a week.
Well, I think that's the only challenge in this statement of intent is, but I think what I could do with a consultant is, again, I need to go back and look specifically at what they said. But if I can use my judgment on traffic, automobile traffic or vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic and bicycle, plus another factor that enters into which roads would get highlighted as subject to further improvement or whatever we going to call it, is the connectivity issue.
Right.
So the thing that Eaton and Carl do is they get you over into neighborhoods and to Vineland. So there's a connectivity point.
Which is why I think Barry's suggestion of showing how these, routes would connect to our neighboring communities, because I mean, Eaton connects to Winchester.
Right.
And so that's I guess one of the primary ways that people would get to a neighboring community, whether you're talking Campbell or,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, so my suggestion is just almost recommended routes or where we think people will want to go.
Right.
If we had unlimited funds, then we would, make nice sidewalks and bike lanes on all of these, if the area allowed for it.
I
And
would say
it's,
some people might say, I want a country look, I don't want sidewalks.
yes.
But-
Yeah, we've been
and-
down that road. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And-
the fact that you're suggesting it be studied and looked at and the neighborhood be consulted
Yeah.
Mhm,
are all part of a future process. I think that's implied.
okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that those maps look very similar to figure 4-1 and 4-2. Maybe not necessarily that same color coding, because we're not necessarily proposing class 2 bike lane, class 3 bike lane, or
And not having the numbers that identify the specific projects.
yeah.
It would just be some
Yes.
sort of notation or color code that just identified areas.
Yes.
But then that would,
I'm sorry, Barry, go ahead.
but then that would be followed by, the major safety concerns or deficiencies that these guys identified as a separate item.
Would there be merit to having a high, low, medium future study? In other
Oh, that's
words,
that's an interesting idea.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but certainly some sort of prioritization somehow would be
well,
good.
for example, I mean, if all of Dave's would be of concern, around the school, there's a high level of interest vis-a-vis, because of the demands of pedestrians, kids,
Mhm.
parents, walkers, so on. I was just thinking that there may be areas which are clearly a higher concern, higher level of concern, and areas like, for example, Doreen was saying, Lower Eden, which was.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, for example, if you just take the two S curves that we've talked about, the S curve on Dave's, I would think is kind of more of a high priority because I think that Dave's gets used a lot. The S curve on Eaton, even though it's in my neighborhood, I would say that that's kind of lower priority because just the volume of people. I mean, there's a lot of walkers, but we make do. But in terms of prioritizing or noting, it's like, I think it's much more important to tackle something like Dave's.
Well, what was started jumping in my head is if I took your statements in this document and the comments that you've made in the meeting and Bob's comments perhaps as well, as subject to some interpretation, and had a go at it with the consultant and brought back the maps that you're looking for, that you could then say, we agree as a commission or
Yeah.
not.
Mhm.
Take it a step at a time, if you will.
Yeah.
Mhm. That seems like a very good approach if you're willing to put in that extra work.
Well, I've got a lot of fair amount of extra time, Barry.
Mhm.
You're good. And you're gonna get a
Well,
helper, right? You're gonna
this
get a
is
helper.
This is right. This is a community priority, so I think you
Mhm.
need to get at this and get the master plan done.
Mhm. Okay. All right, that sounds good. What other things do you need clarity on before you go back to the consultant?
Well, my main interest in this, at this point, is to have the commission express a consensus around this
Mhm.
document
Mhm.
and Bob's comments and anything that Shalini or may
Mhm.
have, and get us, because I can think or envision having a conversation with a consultant about this, the direction that's in this document, and being able to make, let's say, 85%, 90% accomplish what you're looking to do, and bring it back to you for the final 10%.
That sounds great.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm being an optimist, but
I'd like to bring up a real minor detail on this. We mentioned and were confused by El Rancho. But I saw recently that actually, other than a gate, you can see University from the end of El Rancho. And then that must be what the consultants had figured out.
I'm not sure what you do from there.
I don't know who owns that property or
Yeah,
what.
I was just gonna ask, who owns that?
Yeah, no idea, but by just looking at it, ignoring the property ownership, you can see where you could make a really easy path to get to Winchester, and then the entrance to the park is literally across the street. So
Are you saying that there is the ability to walk from the end of El Rancho down?
well, there's a locked gate, but otherwise, yes. I mean, you can't do it, but it's something that could happen.
I've never been down that way. I mean, I've driven by it thousands and thousands of times, but are there homes or what's down there?
There's homes around that cul-de-sac at the end of El Rancho. It's been 4 years since I've been down there, but
Is
I
the
think
end of the cul-de-sac, is it a blank lot?
it looks like, I looked at it on the Google map with, it kind of shows property lines, and it looks to me like that property probably belongs to a condo complex that faces University, which,
One El Rancho.
mhm.
I thought those were single-family homes at the end of El Rancho.
Interesting.
Well, you are correct, Don, but part of the property appears to be the backside of a condo complex on University.
see.
I just did a little bit of work to look at it. I didn't actually, do any serious investigation, but I can now understand why the consultant might have brought that up, because it looks like there's opportunity there. It might not be an opportunity we can take advantage of, but it just looked interesting.
Well, I would want to try to do some research on the private property boundaries at the end of El Rancho and see if there's any kind of an easement in there.
Mhm. We have I just noticed in the chat that there's a member of the public that can explain the situation.
Actually, this is not member of the public. This is our youth commissioner. And
Oh, the youth commissioner. Okay.
he
Okay.
takes the
Go ahead. Is it Johan?
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Hi.
ahead.
Hi, my name is Johan. I'm a youth commissioner. I'm coming to represent the youth commission in this meeting. I just wanted to clarify on the situation on El Rancho with the path connecting to University. So there's a possibility I'm wrong, but from what I know from talking to the neighbors and other residents here, that the reason there's a lock gate is because I think that property that has the path on that connects from El Rancho to University is owned by the apartment complex right nearby. So the reason they put a lock on that gate is because they only want, I think, residents of El Rancho to walk on that path on their property to access Vasona Park.
That certainly makes sense from
Yeah.
the little bit I saw. So that would obviously require some negotiation. It may not be possible at all. And the consultant might have some more insight into that, since they obviously gave it some thought.
Well, I'm not sure if they do, because I don't think they got down to doing examination of the title of the property.
Mhm.
But I will do some research, and I will certainly ask the consultant if they, for whatever reason, happen to have
Mhm.
information about a right of way or easement or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying this bubbles up to a high priority. I just thought it was very confusing to Doreen and I why they brought up El Rancho, and now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Johan, for sharing that information, by the way.
No problem. Happy to help.
Mhm.
I'll report back to you all on that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Don?
No, in your comments, the OBAG grant application, OBAG 3 grant application was a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to Jessica about this as well. It was included, but not funded.
Mm-hmm.
So that won't be forward to the consultant. That's just a local question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't remember if we had any other questions listed at the bottom or just comments. I'm trying to bring it back up.
The only other thing that's sort of a question, Barry, says during our walk through the consultant, problems with the Highway 9 crosswalk were identified. Hopefully this will be included. It would be helpful to me to know the history of that. What were the problems that you're aware of?
Well, they were actually pointed out to me by the consultant. The consultant said this was done improperly, and parts of it weren't working, and they had a good reason for that. So they if you ask them, they hopefully can give you really good answers.
Okay. I thought there was a local concern.
Not that I'm aware of, although Bob also brought it up, although that could have been simply because he was on the same walkthrough that I was,
Uh-huh.
or he might have more knowledge on that. So you may, if you have questions on that, you may want to reach out to Bob before you talk to the consultants, just to see if he can add any additional detail.
Okay, thank you.
But they did, I mean, that was the major, the thing they talked about the most during our walkthrough was that specific crosswalk.
Interesting.
Huh, okay.
But you have to be pretty cautious out there, because even flashing low lights don't stop cars.
Yes, yes. That's going to be dangerous no matter what, sadly. And I guess this is more of a local issue, not a consultant issue, but regarding the funding sources, do you think the funding sources I've mentioned, I mean, they should be near the top of the list, I would think.
Well, the OBAG 3, for example, that wound up being allocated entirely to the city of San Jose
Mm-hmm.
this last year, as I'm told. I don't have the knowledge to tell you anything, what the odds are.
Mm-hmm.
But you know,
But the odds are of what?
getting funding substantial enough to do
Oh.
improvements.
Mm-hmm.
One of
I
the
can't.
things-
I can tell you there was a lot of talk after that about the way the OBAG process is designed, that it's really unfair to small communities. And there's some work being attempting to address that issue, just FYI. But go on, please. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I think I was just going to confess that I don't have the knowledge, expertise, background to give you any kind of an evaluation on these different funding sources. And in fact, one of the things that is on my to-do list is to sit down with the city's finance person and the city manager and go over the whole issue of funding for roads, including safety improvements.
Yeah. The only thing I would expect from you is if you, for some reason, knew that that doesn't make any sense, we shouldn't have it. But I believe they're all possible, and we don't need. That doesn't mean they'll happen. They should just be here as things that we need to keep in mind and consider in the future.
Yes, I agree, absolutely. And having them listed in the appendix, I think, is constructive. And
for sure, the Measure B, education and encouragement. I mean, we get $10,000 a year. I mean, that's money we're getting for sure. And there are some improvements you can, there's limitations on what kind of improvements you can make with that. But
isn't that the money that was dedicated to the crossing guard program? Safe routes to school.
Yes, but not in perpetuity.
Gotcha.
Just for the next year.
Yeah, wasn't that something that we were gonna advise on or allocate every year?
So if something better comes along, then we would consider that. But the best thing we've seen, the best use of that money so far has been Safe Roads to School. Just a little bit of history on that. We did offer it, half of it on the first round to Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, but they weren't able to come back with a good way to spend it. So we ended up not giving it to them.
Well, I don't know if you heard in your conversation with the Safe Route to School person, but I'm getting more, the communication that Bob provides at the end, further down the agenda, is something that what would you say, the Safe Route to School folks are continuing to push on, which is doing more to deal with the parents and kids that use the Poppy Bruce intersection less than safely.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think, well, it was probably a couple years ago that we started going around with that. And there's, I noticed in the comments that someone from the public, they just more recently stood out there at the crosswalk and counted cars and whatnot, which I did a couple of years ago. And even at that time, there were even scooters that were just flying down through the intersection, and that intersection could be a lot safer, a lot safer.
I think that actually is something we should talk about when we get to that, but maybe we should finish this and then have a full conversation on that intersection, if that's all right with you guys.
Mhm.
Well, it's on the agenda, so you can.
Yeah, so let's hold off on that, but I definitely think we should discuss it. So the question, are you comfortable at this point going forward, Don? What else what else? Okay. All right, do you think we need to take a vote, or we could just go with that?
I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind taking a vote.
Okay. Does somebody want to,
On a motion to direct staff to carry these forward to the consultant.
mhm.
Okay,
And
please. Go ahead, I'll make the motion that, that Don takes our comments and moves them forward to the consultant and has a discussion about how, and if they can modify the draft, using our comments and, whatever Don adds his knowledge.
Mhm.
Make sense? That he takes it to the consultant,
Yes,
sees how feasible it is.
I agree.
can either Don or Gloissy tighten that up for us, or would you like us to say something a little more succinctly?
I think the intent of the motion is clear.
Okay.
Gloissy can always make things better.
Okay,
You can make
good.
it sound better than I said it.
All right. Could
So
you please ask, go ahead, Shalini?
So are you guys gonna be making a motion, or is this just a topic of discussion and giving staff direction with what you guys have?
We're making a motion to direct staff to move forward with this.
Okay, so I think if it's just providing staff direction, there's no motion needed to be done because there was just a discussion. You guys have notes here, and as long as Don has the notes on what he needs to then, do to be able to move on with the notes that you guys have provided him, we should be fine.
Are you okay with that, Don? Or would you?
Overruled, but yes.
You feel overruled? All right, Gloissy, you successfully overruled Don, and we'll move on.
Yeah, and as far as my understanding is this way, yeah, no motion needs to be made. It's a direction for staff. So we have to take note and make sure we come back, because this will then have to come back at a different meeting. So
Okay.
Yes, direction.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. So we can move on to the next agenda item, which I think was some report from Don. Is that right? Go back to that. Project updates, information. I believe that's what's next. Do you want to go ahead, Don?
Yes. In this report, my intent was to update the commission on 3 projects that have been questions about which it had been asked. The first of those being the Highway 9 safety improvements, the walkway gap project. I became much more familiar with the status of this project by virtue of an online consultation between BKF, the engineering consultant, and Caltrans review staff. The Caltrans review staff continued to operate their technical overview of this project, which in my opinion supersedes the more common sense, let's get the job done approach, because this project, as the commission's aware, is intended to fill in a piece of a walkway on the north side of Highway 9 that was omitted due to funding limitations a number of years ago on a project that was jointly undertaken by Saratoga, Los Gatos, and Monte Sereno. Caltrans is applying new standards and new requirements and their normal exercise of caution and comment, sending the consultant away from the Zoom conference that I listened 10 days ago, back to the drawing board to once again make modifications to the preliminary design. Hopefully that modification of the design by BKF will lead to a Caltrans staff approval, so this project can move forward to getting a Caltrans permit, along with certain design exceptions, that being the width of the sidewalk and the width of the shoulder. If those exceptions are ultimately granted, then of course the big challenge comes in getting the funding for the city portion of the project and finding grant funding to pay the rest. So this remains in the ping pong match between the Caltrans technical staff and our consultant, who, by the way, was extremely effective in the diplomacy of that conversation.
So there was no funding already defined for this? For some reason, I thought there was.
Well, there was previous funding, but depending on what gets required, it may not be enough. And I'm not aware of a current allocation of funds on deposit at the city or even subject to a grant reimbursement. I think that getting funding for the project once the design is complete is a future challenge.
Okay. That's
And in fact, that it was included in the not funded OBAG 3 grant, which is the subject of that next item on my staff report.
You talked about a design exception with respect to the shoulder. Is there a shrinkage of the shoulder in this design?
No, it's just that it didn't meet Caltrans' current standard for shoulder width. According to the different reviewers in this team of Caltrans staff had different areas of emphasis, and one of them was the shoulder width guy.
But hasn't that changed over the years? It went from 5 to 6. Now it's 6, as I understood it.
That's the width of the sidewalk.
Okay.
That's correct. It did change from 5, and what we're trying and to do that is in a very expensive design change. It would add about $400,000 to the price tag, which is already hovering around $500,000. So the argument is build it the same way.
Grandfather it in, kind of.
Well, and it already is 5 feet on either end of this gap.
Yeah.
So by making this 900-foot section 6 feet wide, what do you really gain? But that also gets to influencing the shoulder width, because if you make the wider sidewalk, you reduce the width of the shoulder. And the guy who wanted the shoulder width bigger, and I can't recall the width of the shoulder, but the design that the consultant had put together for the 6 foot wide sidewalk did not have sufficient. It was less shoulder width than Caltrans wants. So that needs to be worked out. And I think at the end of the day, there isn't enough room to have a shoulder of the width that they would really like. So I think we need a design exception for both the sidewalk width and the shoulder width.
Mhm.
But how much they're willing to give on the shoulder width is currently under consideration.
I don't feel comfortable with the answer to my question, though. Would the shoulder be made smaller or just not grow as much as they would like?
Smaller than what? I'm sorry.
What it is right now.
Well, there's no sidewalk, so the shoulder is more than wide enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once we put a 5-foot sidewalk in there, the shoulder, that is the distance from the curb to the edge of the traveled lane, which I think has a stripe on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm. Yeah.
It diminishes that to less than 8 feet, as I recall the number. And if you
Okay.
take it to 6 feet sidewalk width, it reduces it another foot.
Mhm.
Depending on
Okay.
how you handle trying to, because if you push the sidewalk back into the hillside, you increase the height of the retaining walls, you impact utilities that are in that area. And so again, that's where that extra price comes from.
Mhm.
So this is an exercise in trade-offs that the consultant is attempting to negotiate with Caltrans.
I don't know if it's worth anything, but my personal opinion is, the wider the shoulder, because that's used extensively by bicyclists, the better.
I
And
agree.
And it sounds like the 6-foot sidewalk doesn't make any sense to anybody other than it's maybe a standard or something.
I agree, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Next
right.
project, unless there are any other questions on that.
No, thank you for digging into that.
The second being the OBAG grant, which again, there were 2 projects included. Dave's and the Highway 9 Gap project we just talked about. Neither project was approved. Any question or approved for
No.
funding?
Yeah. Yeah. No, as you said, only San Jose had stuff approved. And I think only certain neighborhoods in San Jose.
Well, the next project then is this year's pavement improvement project, which made improvements on Greenwood Road from Highway 9 to Greenwood Lane, on Lana Drive from Winchester to Xena, on an Alexander from Bachman to the Inn, and on Austin Way from Quito to Highway 9. That work has all been completed by McKim Corporation. It's a company that's worked with Monte Sereno before. Generally did a good job. They're still a contractor to be contended with, but they did a good job, I think. Those roads were the pavement was ground away, either completely or on the edges, as was the case in Greenwood Road. And a new 2-inch layer of hot asphalt placed. In the case of Greenwood and Austin, the speed humps that were there were replaced. And after all paving was done, the markings and striping and legends were all reinstalled, generally using thermoplastic technology, which has a much greater durability. The project was put together, Jessica put that project together, put it out to bid. I stepped in the door and got the opportunity to work with the contractor. The one thing that's mentioned here, and if you can click on that photograph at the end, you can see a bit of what was found after Austin Way was ground. The old pavement was ground away, is that a previous overlay project had used what's called fabric Petromat's, a common commercial brand name, under the overlay because it breaks up the stress and the cracks don't migrate up through the new asphalt. The problem is that the grinding that was done did not remove all of that old petromat and left thin layers of asphalt on top of fabric. So we had to do supplemental grinding and hand removal, manual removal, I should say, to get the roadway ready for repaving, and we reinstalled fabric, a new fabric under this new overlay. Another reason for that, you can see in the lower picture, is we uncovered the remaining rail of the interurban railroad there right at Quito. There's a iron rail in there, which was from that 1930s interurban.
That's a piece of history.
It is indeed.
I remember.
My mom used to travel from Los Gatos to Sunnyvale on that very train.
Oh, wow. I do remember years ago, you could see those tracks kind of poking up above the road surface for many years.
Well, the other thing that's part of the legacy is that those rails were set in concrete. So you have under Austin a differential underlaying pavement. Some of it is Portland cement concrete, and some of it is not. So that differential gives rise to the need for the fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my official report.
All right, thank you for all that information. One member of the public did mention to me that although they were very happy with work done on Greenwood, they felt that the speed humps were even bigger or taller than they were previously.
It's perhaps I spoke to that same citizen. He was quite vociferous about the impact of those speed humps. I measured them, and with a very scientific 6-foot straight edge, and the challenge is that they complied with the specification in the contract. Bad news is, I agree, they are more severe than they originally were. I asked the contractor for a price to modify those speed humps, and the proposal was $17,000. So because they met the specification in the contract, the decision I made was to recommend we retain those as they were.
So just a really crazy question. I mean, as you're aware, that's a pretty nice street. If the residents were to put together $17,000, then could you make that happen? If they asked me that question?
Well, I'm not sure about the now that the contract is over, what that price would be, but it's interesting because I had that one complaint and I was waiting for others to follow. None ever did. And in fact, when I was out doing my highly scientific measurement of the shape and elevation and the height of those humps, I was counseled by 2 different pedestrians to don't mess with it. So my ad hoc vote was on those lines, but Barry, it would be something to research if the and of course the people who benefit the most from the speed humps are the fronting property owners. And the people who benefit the least are those on Greenwood Lane and Upper Greenwood Road. So it's always a challenge on whether humps go in or not. It's become, I know the neighborhood I'm in Los Gatos is trapped with speed humps all around.
So Barry, one comment. Last year we put into, I think it was last year, into effect a procedure whereby someone in a neighborhood could make a request for, traffic calming or something. If the residents were so inclined, maybe they could go through that process, assuming they also would provide the funding, if it works out. But it seems to me that there should be some sort of process, because it sounds like there are probably differing opinions in the neighborhood. So if someone wanted to, maybe they could go through the process that we enacted, or, that's kind of, in place right now.
Mhm.
If they wanted the speed bumps addressed to go down.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
that's a really good suggestion. Although I'll have to admit I was talking a little bit in jest. It was more because I see this person socially frequently. It's more of a party conversation, the person that complained about it, than anything else.
Well, it
So,
sounds like there might be some that wouldn't
Yeah.
want it, but
yeah,
you could always point him in a direction and give him some work to do if he really felt that strongly about it.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And if people feel strongly, that's the approach they should take.
Exactly.
So I completely agree with you. Good point.
The one caller that was quite vociferous and energetic about it lived on Greenwood Lane. The people who were walking down Greenwood Road were residents of Greenwood Road in that
Mhm.
section. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Doreen's absolutely right. Generally the traffic calming protocol is for adding new features to calm the traffic, slow the traffic, and so on. This would sort of be the reverse, but there's no
Mhm.
reason that it couldn't take place just as suggested.
My gut feeling is wasn't that big of a concern, at least to the person I talked to. It was more they noticed it than anything else,
Yeah.
and they do see the benefit of the traffic bump. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate all that information. Okay, looking back at the agenda, if I can find it. New business. Any additional comments on the new commissioner? Gloissy already mentioned a little bit, so maybe that's everything we need to know.
Yes, for
I would
now.
only say that she came in and spent about an hour with me.
Mhm.
Letting me know her perspectives, thoughts. We discussed her background and so on. So she's very enthusiastic. I hope she's still looking forward to serving.
And are we still short one commissioner, or does that fill?
Actually, I just received, I think it was last night, an application. So I will be putting that on the next council meeting for approval, and you guys should be fully, have a full staff, or not staff, but a group of commissioners for this upcoming year. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. The next item on the agenda is Bob's comments about that were really forwarded, I believe, from somebody that looked at Bruce and Poppy. And my understanding, and Doreen, Doreen and Shalini both need to comment on this, but that we sort of have a plan in place to work on that intersection with bulb outs, and it's just on hold until the pavement improvement project
That's what I
tackles
understand.
Bruce.
Bulb outs and I believe a raised crosswalk.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was part of it. And also cleaning up, that end of Poppy as you head into El Sombroso,
Mm-hmm.
to make it much more pedestrian and scooter and bicycle friendly.
So Don, have you learned about, do you know anything about this yet?
No, that's all news to me. I'll need to.
Okay, so sadly, I think it's another phone call to Jessica on your part.
I was gonna say Jessica's probably the best one to tell him where that project, the status of that project. But it was my understanding that that's kind of in the works and subject to when they do the Bruce Avenue pavement improvement project.
This commission spent a tremendous amount of time talking about Bruce and that intersection.
And
And
reviewing it and counting cars and counting kids and.
And
yeah.
we even went through that the process that Doreen brought up earlier, because many residents wanted speed bumps. And so there was a neighborhood vote on putting in speed bumps, which narrowly lost. So
Yeah.
there's definitely something that was a big concern to us, and we thought we had a plan in place to fix it within the next couple of years when Bruce came up on the pavement improvement plan.
Well, there's actually a neighborhood improvement project that as I'm recalling vaguely.
That's probably it.
May have already been designed. I would have to look into it and see if it includes these safety improvements that we just talked about. That speed humps, of course, are not intersection based. I mean, raised crosswalks would be, but
No, it was my understanding that the speed bumps got turned down by the neighborhood because it got voted against. But I thought that we had talked about doing a raised crosswalk at that intersection to slow some of the cars down and bulb outs and creating a safe space for kids to wait before they cross the street.
yeah, I mean, I talked with Wendy at length, who is the author of this, or is relaying this email. And the emphasis of her comments were on that intersection of Bruce and Poppy. And the issue was that in spite of stop signs, the crosswalks that are there, and the presence of kids on bikes, scooters, and foot, the cars being driven by parents, I might add, during the busy time, didn't slow down, didn't stop. So the question that arises, is this an engineering problem or an enforcement problem?
Well, I think the existing infrastructure there lends itself to people just blowing through and cutting corners. Whereas I think that with the proposed bulb outs and a raised crosswalk, they're going to have to slow down because you're not just going to be able to cut the corners. We talked about putting posts and stuff on the bulb outs just to kind of provide protection for those kids who have to stay and, wait, especially as they're coming down from El Sombroso to wait there to cross to go to Dave's. They don't have a safe place to land. They don't have a safe place to wait. So.
Well, and that's important to have that there. Although again, the narrative to me is the kids and on the bikes and scooters and walking don't wait. That's part of the conflict.
Oh, no, exactly. They just blow right through.
Well, I need to do research, starting with an email to Jessica and then getting into the files. Obviously, as you have pointed out, it's an area of significant concern to the commission, and staff needs to get into that, pull it out from whatever closet it's in.
And the improvement project you mentioned, which involved things like drainage improvement on the street. I mean, it was all part of the same project. So I'm guessing fixing the corner was going to be done at the same time that, for example, some of the drainage issues on that street were addressed. Now, back to your earlier question, is it an enforcement issue or a infrastructure issue? And it sounds like from reading this email, it's both. I mean,
Yeah.
what we looked at was the infrastructure, but it sounds like it would be good to get a police officer to spend a little bit of time there also.
And Wendy and I talked about, and she has subsequently communicated about having a crossing guard there some days. That was based on there probably isn't funding for a whole nother crossing guard. But again, crossing guards are an enforcement tool. That's when the problem is occurring for 2 hours, let's say, or an hour, you've got somebody there dealing with it and so on. One of the things that was proposed somewhere along the way was, we'll put a flashing light in there. Well, flashing lights again are easily ignored by people who are in a hurry. And secondly, they're very, very expensive. So I think that the commission, it sounds, I don't want to second guess work that you all have already done. So, but there is always that determination, you know, is it engineering, enforcement, or education? I think the school should be doing, and if it isn't already, education to parents and kids on an ongoing basis. But again, maybe that's already happening. I don't know.
Mhm. And just food for us to think about in the future is, you know, if we give another $10,000 to Safe Routes to School, we could potentially attempt to direct some of this funding to this particular problem, or even give that money to somebody else, like the crosswalk program, if that's an independent program.
Yeah, I'm afraid that you may have a user problem with the money.
Mhm.
But
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
well, I think that Safe Routes to School gets used to having revenue sources that it has and wants to find new ones. So,
Hmm.
but again, that's reality in the commission's decision.
Yeah.
How they allocate its funds.
Mhm. I mean, it hasn't been going on for that long. It's a fairly new funding source, but yeah, I see what you mean. So it sounds like so you're going to go away, Don, and unfortunately have to dig up all this work that we already did and Jessica already did. But then what on the enforcement side, if people are actually running the stop sign, do you think somebody should ask an officer to spend a little bit of time there?
Well, that's on the agenda for that discussion. There is a new police officer who is assigned, I don't know if it's to schools generally or traffic safety, but this officer is known to folks on the Safe Routes to School committees. He was highly praised, and he begged off coming to the last meeting because of the Los Gatos parade and so on, that was taking a lot of time of the department. So I'm pretty certain he will be participating in the next Safe Routes to School group meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue of this intersection, I'm certain, will be discussed.
And is that something you're going to continue to be involved with, so you could effectively be our liaison to that organization?
I intend to do that. Yes, it's a very local, very important to the citizens of Monte Sereno program. Some of the more esoteric region-wide and statewide programs, I put those on a less important list.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be careful because sometimes there's money attached to those. But I intend to be an active, well, I don't know about active, but a regular participant and communicate what comes from those meetings with you folks. Doesn't mean that one of you couldn't also be involved, but that I certainly will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always thought it would be nice to have a liaison. I don't have any interest in doing it myself, so it's great to hear that you'll be able to share that information.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think we've beat that one to death. I think a lot of the work on this was done before Bob joined. Is that correct, Doreen?
Yes.
Regarding
Yeah,
Bruce. So Bob isn't aware of it. I mean, we kind of thought we were done with figuring out what to do, and we were just going to sit around and wait until this neighborhood improvement project happened. That was the status.
Yeah.
All right, staff report. Anything else other than all the stuff you reported on?
Not for me, no, thank you.
Okay. And then future agenda items. I mean, one thing is, as Don had suggested, we wait until the new commissioners were here to have a vote on the new chair and vice chair. So we decided to do that at the next meeting in February. Otherwise, I'm not sure what else we at one time, Don and I talked about a list of agenda items. I don't have that in front of me.
Well,
Is
wouldn't one be what Don coming back if he has a chance to meet or talk with the consultants before the next meeting to see what their response to the changes to the draft master plan would be?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd probably be a biggie. And hopefully he'll be able to, an update on Bruce just to reset us and see where we are.
Yeah. Maybe you can connect with Jessica before.
Yeah. Or is that, if the neighborhood improvement plan is not going to happen right away, that's not urgent. So Don, if you think that should wait, that's fine with us too.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to find your list.
Oh,
What were you referring to, Barry?
well, we'd like to know what the status is with Bruce and
Right.
the plan we'd put in place. But as it's meant to go along with I think you called it a neighborhood improvement plan. If that's a year out, then maybe you'd prefer to delay that topic.
Well, the look that I had is it is currently not funded.
Mhm.
So, obviously, there's only so many dollars in the city's budget for roads,
Mhm.
including the annual maintenance program. So that, and frankly, sometime fairly early in the spring, I would anticipate bringing to the commission what the proposed funding for road and
Mhm.
bicycle projects is being prepared for your endorsement, or recommended modification.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be the February meeting, but
Mhm. It is probably worthwhile to talk to Jessica ASAP before more stuff gets forgotten with regard to Bruce, because there was an awful lot of work done on that.
yeah, I don't know where that is, but there's a lot of files to look through, but I'll start with her tomorrow.
Okay. Does anybody have any other items that should be on the agenda? I'm sure Don and I will talk before the meeting. If anything else comes up, we'll add it. So I guess that's it. I would like to, before we close though, take an opportunity to thank Doreen for her service. She has been a very valuable member of this commission and has really put a lot of work into it. And I'm really sad to see her go. So Doreen, thank you very much for all you've done.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. I may be back. It's just that the next year and a half for our family is very, very busy. So you may, if I see the little notice come up in a couple of years, I may be back.
Well, I hope it sounds like there might be some opportunities for a lot of fun with your family. I hope you can take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen.
Yeah.
Nice
All
working
right.
with you all.
Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the holidays and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.